On a crisp autumn evening, after years of hard work and countless overtime hours, a dedicated mother of two finally received the news she'd been waiting for: a promotion at the accounting firm where she'd been working for the past 5 years. The joy in her heart was overwhelming, not just because of the achievement, but because she could finally fulfill a simple wish her children had been making for months: to eat at that fancy restaurant they passed every day on their way to school. The day had been particularly special. She had spent extra time helping her little ones get ready, watching as they excitedly picked out their favorite clothes. Her daughter, a bright-eyed second grader, chose her beloved purple dress with tiny white flowers, carefully smoothing out every wrinkle. Her son, a playful first grader, insisted on wearing his grown-up button-up shirt, even though it was slightly big for him, a hand-me-down from his cousin that he treasured. As they drove to the restaurant, the kids pressed their faces against the car windows, pointing at the twinkling lights that had just started to come on as dusk settled in. Their mother couldn't help but smile at their excitement. She remembered her own childhood, how rare and special restaurant visits had been, and how she'd promised herself she'd work hard to give her children those moments of joy. The restaurant, with its warm golden lights and brick exterior, looked even more inviting than usual. The smell of freshly baked bread wafted through the air as they walked toward the entrance, making their mouths water. The little boy clutched his mom's hand tightly, while his sister skipped ahead, already talking about the chocolate cake she'd seen in the display window. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with the gentle hum of conversation and the soft clinking of silverware. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the dining room, and the walls were adorned with beautiful landscape paintings. The children's eyes grew wide as they took in the elegant surroundings. It was everything they'd imagined and more. The host at the front desk welcomed them with a professional smile, gathering menus and leading them through the restaurant. The little girl couldn't contain her excitement, whispering "Mummy, look" at every new thing she noticed: the fancy plates, the flickering candles, the elegant table settings. Her brother, typically the more energetic of the two, was unusually quiet, taking everything in with wide-eyed wonder. They were seated at a table near the center of the restaurant, and the children immediately began exploring their menus, even though they couldn't read all the words. Their mother helped them sound out the different dishes, explaining what each one was, watching their faces light up at the descriptions of pasta, steaks, and especially the desserts. The family moment was perfect, the kind that creates lasting memories. The mother watched her children's faces glow with excitement as they discussed what they might order, that innocent joy making every extra hour she'd worked worth it. She took a mental photograph of this moment. Her daughter carefully folding her napkin in her lap like a lady, her son sitting up straight trying to mimic the businessmen at nearby tables. But happiness can be fragile, and sometimes the world has a way of trying to dim even the brightest moments. As they settled into their seats and began to feel comfortable in their surroundings, the mother noticed something that made her heart sink slightly: the disapproving glances from a couple seated at a nearby table. She tried to shake off the feeling, focusing instead on her children's happiness, but there was no mistaking the change in atmosphere that was about to test their special evening. The mother took a deep breath, determined not to let anything spoil this moment for her children. She'd faced similar situations before and had learned to hold her head high. Tonight was about celebration, about showing her children that their hard work and dreams matter. As she helped them look through the menu one more time, she silently reminded herself that they belonged here just as much as anyone else, even as she felt the weight of unwelcome stares growing heavier. Little did they know, their evening was about to take an unexpected turn, and sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. The initial excitement of being in the restaurant began to shift as the family settled into their seats. The mother noticed the change in atmosphere almost immediately, though she tried her best to focus on her children's joy. The couple at the next table, probably in their late 60s, kept throwing glances their way, not the friendly kind that sometimes came from people charmed by her children's enthusiasm, but the kind that made her stomach tighten with familiar unease. Her daughter was in the middle of telling a story about her day at school, gesturing animatedly as she described the art project she'd made. The little girl's voice carried slightly in her excitement, as children's voices often do, but nothing excessive or disruptive. Yet the couple's reactions suggested otherwise. The woman at the next table would dramatically wince at every slight raise in the child's voice, while her husband made a show of turning his chair away from their table. The mother gently reminded her children about their indoor voices, though her heart ached at having to dampen their natural enthusiasm. Her son, always sensitive to tension, began to shrink in his seat, his earlier confidence fading. He looked at his mother with questioning eyes, sensing that something wasn't quite right, but not understanding what. The waiter had just brought their drinks, chocolate milk for the kids, served in grown-up glasses that made them feel special, and water with lemon for their mother. As her daughter reached for her glass, bubbling with excitement, she accidentally rattled the silverware. It wasn't a major disturbance, just the typical small noise of a family restaurant, but the reaction from the nearby table was immediate and harsh. "I remember when this used to be a nice place," the elderly woman stage whispered to her husband, loud enough to be clearly heard. "The kind of place where people knew how to behave properly." Her husband nodded vigorously, adding his own pointed comments about standards these days. The mother's hands trembled slightly as she helped her son with his napkin, but she maintained her composure. She'd worked too hard and waited too long for this evening to let anyone ruin it. She engaged her children in a quiet game of I Spy, trying to distract them from the growing tension. Her daughter, usually outgoing and chatty, began speaking in whispers, picking up on the stress in the air. Other diners nearby had started to notice the situation, some awkwardly focused on their meals, while others threw sympathetic glances their way. A young couple at a table across from them smiled encouragingly, but quickly looked away when the elderly man glared in their direction. The comments from the next table grew more frequent and less subtle. When the children's menus were brought over, complete with crayons for coloring, the elderly woman made a show of asking to be moved to another table, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "The atmosphere in this section isn't what we're used to," she announced to anyone who would listen. The mother felt her chest tighten as she recognized the familiar code words and implications. She'd experienced this before, at stores, in parks, at school events, but somehow it felt worse here, on what was supposed to be their special night. Her daughter, picking up on her mother's distress, stopped coloring and whispered, "Mommy, did we do something wrong?" That question, asked in such an innocent voice, hit her like a physical blow. She wanted to protect her children from these harsh realities for as long as possible, to let them believe in a world where their joy wouldn't be seen as an offense by others. She squeezed her daughter's hand and assured her that they had done nothing wrong, while her mind raced with decisions about how to handle the situation. Should she speak up and risk escalating the situation? Should she ask to be moved to another table, teaching her children to retreat from unfairness? Should she simply try to ignore it and potentially let her children internalize this treatment as acceptable? Every option felt wrong, yet she knew she had to make a choice. As she weighed her options, she caught sight of their waitress watching the situation unfold from across the room. The young server's expression suggested she'd been observing for a while, and something in her determined stance suggested that perhaps the mother wouldn't have to face this challenge alone. The situation at the restaurant took a turn for the worse, just as the family was trying to decide on their main courses. The elderly man, apparently emboldened by his wife's earlier comments, began speaking even louder, making sure his words carried clearly to the surrounding tables. "You know," he announced to his wife, though his voice was pitched to reach everyone nearby, "I remember when certain people knew their place. When you could enjoy a nice meal without having to worry about who might show up next to you." He punctuated his words by throwing pointed looks at the mother and her children. The little boy, who had been quietly coloring his menu, dropped his crayon. His small hands trembled as he reached to pick it up, and when he couldn't quite reach it, tears began welling in his eyes. Not because of the crayon, but because even at his young age, he could feel the weight of the man's words, even if he didn't fully understand them. His sister, usually the more outspoken of the two, had stopped eating her breadstick mid-bite. Her eyes darted between her mother and the hostile couple, trying to make sense of why these strangers seemed so angry at them. The excitement that had filled her face earlier had been replaced by confusion and hurt. The mother felt her throat tighten as she watched her children's joy dissolve. She'd faced discrimination before, but seeing it affect her children this way sparked something deep inside her. Her hands clenched under the table as she struggled to maintain her composure. Years of experience had taught her that showing any reaction would only make things worse, would only reinforce the negative stereotypes these people clearly believed. And look at how they're letting those children behave, the elderly woman chimed in, despite the fact that the children had been sitting quietly for the past several minutes. In my day, parents knew how to control their kids, but I suppose some people just don't know any better. Other diners were now openly watching the scene unfold. A few looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and avoiding eye contact with anyone involved. Others seemed unsure of what to do, their faces showing a mix of sympathy and hesitation. A young man at a nearby table half rose from his seat, looking like he wanted to say something, but his companion pulled him back down with a whispered warning. The mother took a deep breath and tried to engage her children in conversation about their upcoming weekend plans, hoping to distract them from the increasingly hostile atmosphere. But her daughter's lip was quivering, and her son had pushed his coloring book away, no longer interested in the activity he'd been so excited about just minutes earlier. "Mommy," her daughter whispered, her voice trembling, "can we go home? I'm not hungry anymore." The words felt like a knife to the mother's heart. This was supposed to be their celebration, their special moment. She'd worked so hard for this promotion, saved carefully to afford this treat for her children, and now... The elderly man, seeing the family's distress, seemed to take it as a victory. He smiled smugly at his wife and raised his voice even further. "Siddy, that's what happens when you let just anybody in. They don't know how to appreciate nice things. They don't belong in places like this." The mother felt tears threatening to spill but held them back. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She opened her mouth to finally say something, to defend her children's right to exist in this space, to celebrate their mother's achievement without harassment. But before she could speak, a shadow fell across their table. The waitress who had been watching the situation stood there, her face set in a determined expression. She held a tray in her hands, but her stance suggested she wasn't just there to take their order. Behind her, the restaurant manager was making his way through the dining room, his expression equally resolute. The atmosphere in the restaurant seemed to freeze for a moment, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The mother looked up at the waitress, seeing something in the young woman's eyes that gave her hope, a promise that this story wasn't over yet, and that perhaps not everyone would stand silently by while injustice played out before them. The waitress had been watching everything unfold from her service station, her heart growing heavier with each passing minute. In her 5 years of working at the restaurant, she'd learned to read people well, to notice the subtle signs of discomfort, to sense when something wasn't right. Tonight, those skills had her full attention focused on the family being harassed just for trying to enjoy their dinner. She'd noticed them when they first walked in, the children's eyes sparkling with excitement, the mother's proud smile as she helped them with their menus. It was the kind of genuine family moment that made her job worthwhile. But she'd also noticed the elderly couple's reaction immediately, recognized the all-too-familiar looks of disapproval that had nothing to do with behavior and everything to do with prejudice. From her position near the kitchen, she could see everything clearly. She watched as the mother tried to maintain a brave face for her children, saw how she gently encouraged them to keep their voices down even though they weren't being particularly loud. The waitress felt her hands tighten around her order pad as she heard the elderly couple's increasingly loud comments. What really got to her was watching the children's joy slowly fade. The little boy who had been sitting up so straight and proud was now hunched over, trying to make himself smaller. His sister, who had been chattering excitedly about the dessert menu earlier, had gone quiet, her eyes fixed on her lap. The waitress remembered her own childhood experiences with discrimination, how it felt to have happy moments stolen by strangers' cruelty. Between taking orders and serving other tables, she kept glancing back at the situation. She saw other diners nervousing too, the uncomfortable shifts in seats, the concerned glances, the whispered conversations behind menus. Some looked like they wanted to help but didn't know how. Others seemed to be purposely looking away, perhaps afraid of getting involved. The breaking point came when she overheard the elderly man's comment about certain people not belonging there. She saw the mother's face crumple for just a second before regaining composure, saw the little girl's lip quiver as she asked to go home. Something inside the waitress snapped, not in anger, but in determination. She'd seen this scenario play out too many times before, had too often been part of the silent majority that looked away. In her early days as a server, she'd been afraid of causing trouble, of losing her job if she spoke up. But experience had taught her that staying quiet in the face of injustice only allowed it to grow stronger. Making her decision, she walked briskly to the manager's office. Her hands were shaking slightly as she knocked on the door, but her voice was steady as she explained the situation. The manager, a father of 3 himself, listened intently, his expression growing more concerned with each detail. As she spoke, memories of similar incidents flashed through her mind, times when she wished someone had stepped in, had said something, had shown that not everyone accepted such behavior as normal. She remembered the faces of other families who had left restaurants early, their special evenings ruined by prejudice and hatred. The manager didn't hesitate. He stood up immediately, straightening his tie as he prepared to address the situation. But the waitress wasn't finished. She had a plan, something that might help salvage the evening for the family, especially the children. She quickly explained her idea about moving them to the private booth in her section, the one usually reserved for special occasions. As they walked back into the dining room together, she caught sight of herself in one of the decorative mirrors. She saw determination in her own eyes, the kind that comes from knowing you're about to do something right, even if it's not easy. She thought about her own mother, who had always taught her that standing up for others was just as important as standing up for yourself. The restaurant had grown oddly quiet, as if everyone could sense something was about to happen. The elderly couple was still making their snide comments, but now they seemed almost desperate, like they knew their power to ruin the evening was about to be challenged. Taking a deep breath, the waitress stepped forward, the manager right behind her. As she approached the family's table, she saw the mother look up, probably expecting more negativity. Instead, the waitress gave her warmest, most genuine smile, not of pity but of solidarity. She was about to show this family that for every person who tried to dim their light, there were others ready to help it shine brighter. The intervention began with a simple gesture that spoke volumes. The waitress approached the family's table with a warm, genuine smile that seemed to light up her whole face. Behind her, the manager stood tall and professional, his presence adding weight to what was about to unfold. "I have wonderful news," the waitress announced, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by nearby tables. "We've had a last-minute cancellation for our best table, our special private booth near the garden window. I'd be honored if you'd accept an upgrade to that section." She directed her words to the mother, but made sure to include both children in her smile. The little girl's eyes widened with interest, momentarily forgetting her distress. The private booth was indeed special. It had cushioned seats that curved in a half circle, offering a perfect view of the restaurant's small but beautifully maintained garden. At night, the garden was lit with tiny white lights that twinkled like stars. "Really?" the little boy whispered, sitting up straighter for the first time since the trouble began. The waitress nodded enthusiastically. "And wait until you see the special dessert menu we offer in that section." She winked at him, and a tiny smile started to return to his face. Meanwhile, the manager had turned his attention to the elderly couple, who were now shifting uncomfortably in their seats. His voice was professional but firm as he addressed them. "I need to speak with you about the restaurant's policies regarding customer conduct." He gestured toward a quiet corner near his office, making it clear this wasn't a request. The elderly man puffed up, ready to argue, but something in the manager's steady gaze made him think better of it. His wife gathered her purse, muttering under her breath, but the manager's presence left no room for their usual tactics of loud complaints and indirect insults. As the manager led the couple away, the waitress began helping the family gather their things for the move. She chatted easily with the children, asking them about their favorite foods and telling them about the special hot chocolate she could prepare for them, with extra whipped cream and a sprinkle of cinnamon on top. "Look what I found," she exclaimed, pretending to discover a new package of crayons in her apron pocket. "These are our special ones. They have glitter in them." The children's faces lit up at this small but magical detail, and their mother's eyes filled with grateful tears. She quickly blinked away. The walk to their new table became a tiny parade of dignity. Other diners, who had witnessed everything, smiled encouragingly as they passed. A young couple raised their water glasses in a subtle salute. An elderly woman dining alone reached out to pat the mother's hand as they passed, whispering, "You have beautiful children, dear." The private booth was everything the waitress had promised and more. The curved seating created a cozy space that felt like their own private restaurant within the restaurant. The garden view offered a magical backdrop, with soft lights twinkling among the plants and flowers. "Now," the waitress said, placing new menus before them, "let me tell you about our chef's specials." She described each dish with such enthusiasm that the children leaned forward, completely absorbed. Their mother noticed how the waitress had positioned herself to block the view of the main dining room, creating a protective bubble around their space. The manager returned just as they were settling in, stopping by to personally welcome them to their new table. "Your entire meal tonight will be complimentary," he said quietly to the mother. When she began to protest, he held up his hand. "We want you to know that you and your family are valued customers here. What happened earlier does not reflect our values or our community." The waitress then unveiled her surprise. She had already arranged for the kitchen to prepare a special appetizer sampler on the house. The plate was arranged like a work of art, with tiny portions of different dishes creating a rainbow of colors and flavors. "Can we try everything, Mommy?" the little girl asked, her earlier enthusiasm returning full force. Her mother nodded, her own smile growing stronger as she watched her children's joy resurface. As the waitress turned to get their drink orders, she overheard the little boy whisper to his sister, "This is even better than the other table." His sister nodded enthusiastically, already using the glitter crayons to draw what she announced was the best restaurant in the world. The mother caught the waitress's eye, and in that moment, a world of understanding passed between them. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can turn darkness into light, can transform an evening of pain into one of triumph. As the waitress headed toward the kitchen, she could hear the family's laughter beginning to bloom again, like flowers opening after a storm. Back in the main dining room, something remarkable was happening. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically since the elderly couple's departure. It was as if their removal had lifted a heavy cloud, allowing everyone to breathe more freely. The other diners, who had witnessed everything, began talking among themselves, many sharing their own experiences with discrimination and the importance of speaking up. The young couple who had raised their water glasses earlier stopped the manager as he passed their table. "We come here often," the woman said, "but tonight made us proud to be your customers." Her partner nodded in agreement, adding, "It's not every day you see people doing the right thing, even when it's hard." At a nearby table, a grandmother was teaching her grandchildren an important lesson. "Did you see what happened?" she asked them quietly. "That's how you treat people, with kindness and respect. That waitress and the manager, they're showing us how to be better humans." The children nodded solemnly, absorbing their grandmother's words. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, word of what had happened spread quickly among the staff. The chef, a tough veteran of countless busy nights, had tears in his eyes as he personally prepared the family's meals. "Make it special," he told his team, adding extra care to each dish's presentation. The kitchen staff worked with particular attention, knowing these plates carried more than just food. They carried a message of welcome and respect. The waitress found herself receiving quiet thank yous from other servers and staff members as she moved through the restaurant. "I wish I had done that at my old job," one young server confided in her. "I saw something similar happen and didn't know what to do." This led to an impromptu discussion among the staff about handling similar situations in the future. Back at the private booth, the family's evening had transformed into something even more special than originally planned. The children had forgotten their earlier distress, now fully engaged in exploring their magical new space. The little girl had made friends with another child at a nearby table, the two of them comparing drawings made with the glitter crayons. The little boy, typically shy, had found his confidence again. He proudly told the waitress about his school project on space when she brought their main courses. His eyes lit up when she showed genuine interest, asking him questions about his favorite planets and stars. Their mother watched all of this with deep emotion. She saw how the staff's actions had not only saved their evening, but had turned it into a powerful lesson for her children. A lesson about standing up for what's right, about the power of kindness, and about not letting others dim your light. Other families in the restaurant began stopping by their booth on their way out, offering kind words and friendly smiles. A father with teenage daughters paused to tell the mother, "You're raising your children right. Don't let anyone tell you different." His words brought fresh tears to her eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude and hope. The restaurant's owner, who had been called by the manager, arrived later in the evening. He went straight to the family's booth, apologizing for their initial experience and thanking them for giving the restaurant a chance to make things right. He shared his own story of facing discrimination when he first opened the restaurant 20 years ago and how the community had rallied around him. "Times are changing," he told them, "but they only change because good people refuse to accept the old ways." He looked meaningfully at his staff, pride evident in his expression, and because other good people stand up and say, "Not here, not anymore." The waitress, watching from her station, saw how the evening had evolved into something much bigger than just dinner service. She noticed how other servers were paying extra attention to all their tables, how guests were being kinder to each other, how smiles were being shared more freely. It was as if the act of standing up against injustice had reminded everyone of their common humanity. As the evening wore on, the restaurant seemed to glow with a special warmth. The incident that had threatened to ruin one family's celebration had instead sparked a chain reaction of kindness and awareness. Every time the waitress passed the family's booth and heard their laughter, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was more than just serving food. This was about serving humanity, one small act of courage at a time. As the evening drew to a close, the mother gathered her children's drawings and leftover boxes, but she knew they were taking home much more than just food and artwork. The night had transformed from what could have been a traumatic experience into something powerful and meaningful. Before leaving, she asked to speak with both the waitress and the manager. When they came to the table, her voice trembled slightly as she tried to express her gratitude. "What you did tonight," she began, then had to pause to compose herself. "You showed my children something important. You showed them that there are good people in this world who will stand up for what's right." The little girl tugged at the waitress's apron. "Can we come back next week?" she asked hopefully. "I want to sit in our special booth again." The waitress knelt down to the child's level, her eyes shining. "This booth will always be here for you," she promised. "And next time, I'll show you how we make our special rainbow sundae." The little boy, who had been quiet for a moment, suddenly spoke up. "Mommy, remember how you always tell us to be brave?" He looked at the waitress and manager with admiration. "They were brave tonight, just like you teach us to be." His simple observation brought fresh tears to everyone's eyes. The mother reached into her purse to leave a tip, but the waitress gently stopped her. "Please," the waitress said softly, "your family has given us something much more valuable tonight. You've reminded us why we do this job. It's not just about serving food, it's about serving humanity." The manager added his own thoughts. "What happened tonight has inspired some changes in our restaurant," he explained. "Starting next week, we're implementing new training for all our staff about handling discrimination and creating a welcoming environment for everyone." He smiled at the family. "Your experience, though difficult, is going to help make things better for others." Word of what happened that night spread through the community. The restaurant became known not just for its food, but for its stance on treating all customers with dignity and respect. Other local businesses began reaching out to learn about their new training program, wanting to ensure they too were creating welcoming spaces for everyone. The waitress found herself being asked to help develop the training materials, sharing her experience and teaching others how to handle similar situations with courage and grace. She often thought back to that night, remembering how a simple decision to stand up against injustice had created such positive change. The family did return the following week and the week after that. Each visit, they noticed more diversity among the customers. The restaurant had become a symbol of inclusion in the community, a place where families of all backgrounds felt welcome and valued. 1 month later, during another visit, the mother noticed something new on the restaurant's wall, a framed mission statement that read, "Every guest who walks through our doors is family. We stand together against hatred and discrimination, serving love and respect alongside every meal." The little girl pointed excitedly at the new addition. "Look, Mommy, that's because of us," she exclaimed proudly. Her mother hugged her close, realizing that what could have been a traumatic memory for her children had instead become a source of pride and empowerment. The waitress, who had become a familiar friend to the family, shared some exciting news during their meal. The restaurant's anti-discrimination training program had been so successful that other restaurants in the area were adopting it. "Your story," she told them, "is helping change how businesses think about protecting and supporting all their customers." As the seasons changed, the restaurant remained a special place for the family. The little boy celebrated his birthday there, and the staff went all out to make it memorable. The little girl's artwork, created with those glitter crayons on that first night, had been framed and hung in the private booth, inspiring other young artists to add their own creations. The mother often reflected on how one terrible moment had been transformed by the courage of a few good people. She saw how her children had learned valuable lessons about standing up for what's right, about the power of kindness, and about how positive change often starts with one person willing to take a stand. The restaurant had become more than just a place to eat. It had become a testament to the power of community, courage, and compassion. And somewhere in the city, an elderly couple might still be searching for a restaurant that tolerates their prejudice, but they would find fewer and fewer places willing to do so, all because of one waitress who decided that silence in the face of injustice was not an option. The story of that night continued to inspire others, reminding people that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness and courage can create the biggest waves of change. In the end, it wasn't just about a family's dinner being saved. It was about a community learning to stand together, proving that love and respect can triumph over hatred and prejudice one meal at a time.